Tell me your thoughts on the layer one wars that maybe we're currently seeing. I know you just were at the Solana conference in Portugal, and everybody said it was completely off the hook and just so much excitement and development projects. We had Emin Gunseer here of AVAX, former a fellow Cornell graduate like you. I had Macaulay on last week of Algorand. Obviously, we see what Cardano's doing. We're running out of Ethereum co-founders at this point. We see what Dot's doing in a lot of their parachain auctions and stuff. How do you see this playing out? Do you think this is now going to be a battle between less than 10 layer one solutions, and is one of them going to prevail sometime next year, or do you see it differently? Because this directly affects a lot of the companies you advise.
Yeah, for sure. And so we're on multiple chains now. So we support lenders on Polkadot, as well as on Avalanche. And hopefully Solana soon. A little more engineering work than the other chains. So unfortunately that will take a little longer. But and I would say that the interesting thing is going to be the sets of trade-offs that each layer one specialize in. So one thing is how good is the bridge, and how well can I go across chains. There's sort of this thing of there'll be different qualities of service. If I want to do a bunch of low value transactions, like $100 transaction that I want to just go between Matic or Polygon and Solana really fast because they both have low fees or something, I don't need that much security. So I'm going to use kind of maybe a cheaper bridge, but I want to send $10 million of Bitcoin to another chain. I'm going to use a much more secure bridge, might be way slower, might be more inefficient, I pay more fees, something like that, right? I think the bridges will dictate how usage exists on these chains to some extent. I think each of them will have their own things they're especially good at, better chain for NFT gaming, better chain for whatever, but how good the bridges are to them and how close the liquidity is to sort of the applications on that chain will dominate everything. And it's still sort of, I would say it's not clear that there's a very concentrated end state for this. It could be quite diffuse over these chains. I think the real question is what developers want in the long run. Do they want something where it's really hard to develop for, like Solana, but the UX for the end user is snappy? Even though, let's ignore the decentralization piece. Let's just think about it from a product standpoint first. Obviously, they all have very different trade-offs in that spectrum.
Yeah.
Or will it be, hey, they want to just be able to jump from each chain to each chain to each chain, so it needs to be some EVM compatible thing that has a really fast bridge, so maybe that's Avalanche or Polygon to some extent. Or is it going to be a privacy thing, people, the highest value transactions are willing to pay for privacy, so there's a side chain that's focused on that. But yeah, I don't know if I would say it's clear. I think the best developer experience of any chain, period, is probably near, and I'd say sort of Polkadot's probably second in a lot of ways, and yet sort of. It's not clear that those two are that's the dominant thing that people care about. In the Solana case, it's people care about a lot of Solana people building on Solana. Certainly they got rich from Sol price going up, so that's why they're attached to the ecosystem. But the second thing I think they do care about is the fact that in the Phantom wallet. Have you ever used Phantom?
I haven't actually used Phantom. I've heard the UX in Solana is really good, but I haven't used Phantom wallet yet.
You should try. I mean, it will feel like you're using a Square Cash or Venmo or something. It is right. Actually, Venmo's slower than Phantom. Phantom does actually feel almost like it's a very fast app.
Okay.
Of course, you're trading off some decentralization, yada yada yada. There's caveats, but it is interesting that a lot of the developers focus on the fact that the user's UX is great, even though the developer's UX sucks. And there's now this trade-off surface there. So I don't actually have a super strong opinion on whether it'll be a small number take all the win or sort of win, or whether it's sort of going to be this extremely diffuse thing. But I do think the bridges are going to be the biggest, most important thing, because they are the way that liquidity will be able to move throughout this ecosystem more efficiently.
Right. Yeah, those bridges are interesting because, I mean, you deal with a lot of companies that are bridges to a certain extent, not between chains, but between different types of users and each other. So you kind of see that there's not very good bridge technology out there right now between these any chains, are there? I mean, trying to move things from one.
The Avalanche bridge is interesting. It makes a decentralization, or sort of not even decentralization, but more like a security trade-off, because it uses Intel SGX, but it has really good UX because of that. I think in Solana's case, the bridges are always going to kind of be worse than other chains for a couple of reasons. Just like their choice of virtual machine makes it a little bit like annoying. Also, being at really high latency or low latency means that it might be hard to like synchronize like the really slow chain with the really fast chain for a bunch of different reasons, and like the UX won't feel the same necessarily for the end user. And I guess like, yeah, one interesting thing about bridges is that it's very clear that right now the bridge UX can be more valuable to the end user than the yield. Because a lot of people have had bad experiences on bridges. Like they sent a transaction, it was stuck for 30 minutes. They're like, fuck this, I'm like gonna go somewhere else, right? So
yeah.
I think like that's going to be an interesting way that layer ones build moats for themselves, which is really having excellent bridge UX.